This is my RTX 4090, and at the time of filming, it is still the fastest gaming GPU on the market. And this is a 1440p 27-inch IPS gaming monitor that was sent over to me for review by Pixio. And today, I'm pairing these two items together because I want to know how the 4090 really performs at 1440p. Hi, this is eRock on Tech, and today, we're testing games at 1440p. Okay, let me go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Obviously, a 4090 is going to be overkill for 1440p. And I understand that some of you probably think the idea of this video is pretty dumb because the answer to the question is fairly obvious. However, how much is it an overkill for 1440p? And is it actually overkill for 1440p in every game out there? I do think some of the test results today may surprise you. And look, can I level with you for just a minute? Pixio contacted me and said, hey, do you want to take a look at this monitor? And I said, sure, why not? And then it dawned on me. I can make a standard, typical, and frankly, very boring monitor review video. Hey guys, here's the monitor, here's what it can do, here's the specs, etc., and be on about my day. But the reality is nobody's interested in watching product reviews unless they're in the market for that product. And that is something I've come to understand after putting out a few failed videos now. And so today I'm trying to make something a little bit more entertaining and a little bit more interesting for you, the audience, while also doing what Pixio wants me to do, and that is talk about the monitor. So today we're going to take the 4090 and talk about its gaming performance at 1440p, while also talking about what my experience was like testing these games at 1440p on this Pixio monitor. So that's kind of the premise for today. And if that doesn't jive with you, let me know in the comment section below and I can make adjustments for future videos. But hey, at least I'm trying to make it more entertaining. So if you appreciate that, drop me a like, I would appreciate it. But now let's talk about the core of today's video. Now, first of all, we're going to talk about the specs of the PC I'm using. Then we'll talk about the specs of the monitor. And then I'll share with you some quick pros and cons about my experience using the monitor. And then we'll get into the 1440p data, and then after that, we'll close out with some final thoughts. Okay, so for my PC itself, I'm obviously using the Nvidia RTX 4090, and I'm pairing it with the AMD Ryzen 7800X 3D. For my RAM, I'm running a 32GB kit of DDR5 clocked at 6000 megahertz. For my motherboard, I'm currently using the Asus ROG Strix X670EF gaming Wi-Fi motherboard, and the CPU is being cooled by a Corsair 360 AIO. It is the H150i Elite Capellix XT liquid CPU cooler. Okay, that's the core components of the PC being used. Now let's talk about this Pixio monitor. Okay, so this monitor from Pixio is officially called the PX277 Prime Neo, and it retails for $229. Now, this is a 27-inch 1440p display. It has a fast IPS panel. It can handle up to 180 Hertz, and it has a 1 millisecond gray-to-gray response time. It does have adaptive sync technology and a full pivoting stand, and it is VESA mount compatible. Here are all the other specifications for this monitor listed on Pixio's website, and I will have a link to this website down below in the video description. Now, usually I play my games on a 48-inch LG OLED TV, and I'm gonna be honest with you, the OLED TV is amazing and I love it, but it does have one problem. You see, the TV caps out at 120 Hertz, and so anytime I play a game and if I get anything above 120 FPS, I cannot experience those frames. So for the longest time now, I don't really know what it's like to actually play games at 144 plus FPS. I know what it's like to get those frames and see it show up on the screen, but I don't know what it's like to actually experience that. And so that was something I was very excited to try whenever Pixio contacted me about this monitor. Because now with the Prime Neo, I can go all the way up to 180 FPS and actually experience all of those frames. So that was something I was super excited to try out for the first time. Another thing I was very excited to try personally is the fact that this monitor is an IPS display, or more technically a fast IPS display. My experience with monitors have typically always been TN panels or VA panels, and then I got my OLED TV. And so I never really touched IPS or fast IPS. And so again, this is my first experience with an IPS display, and so that is something I'm very excited to try out for the first time in today's video. Now, the unboxing experience was actually very straightforward. There was nothing too complicated about it. Everything you need for the monitor is in the box, including a DP cable that can in fact handle 180 Hertz. And the assembly of the monitor took me less than 60 seconds. I mean, it was super fast, easy, simple, nothing complicated about the process at all. And finally, one more thing that I really love about this monitor is the fact that it is fully adjustable. You can lean it forward, lean it backwards, turn it to the side. You can raise it up, raise it down. It's height adjustable, all the things that you need in a monitor. And so I really like that. Now, personally, if I'm using this monitor in my main setup, I'm not even going to use the stand. I'm going to put it on an arm mount and let it sit back on my desk, but that's me personally. Now, a couple of things I don't really like about the panel so far. Now, let me make this clear. A lot of the things I'm about to say are subjective. That'll be apparent and we'll talk about that. But in terms of objectivity, I only have a little bit I can really nitpick on, and here's what it is. Number one, the price is technically great for what it is, $229. When I first got into PC gaming, in order to get a monitor that had all of these specifications, it would easily cost you $350 to $400 plus. So the fact that you can now get that for $229, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, but it's not good enough. You see, there's another company by the name of Titan Army who also sent me out a monitor with very, very similar specifications, and their monitor is only $199. It is $30 cheaper. Now, is that the end of the world? No, of course it's not. But if you're an average consumer and you look at two monitors side by side and they basically have the exact same specifications without exaggerating, you're obviously going to buy the cheaper option. So Pixio, I would recommend lowering the price by about 30 bucks. The second problem I find here objectively is that on the website under HDR, all it says is yes. Yes, what? Like, what does that mean? So I contacted Pixio and they are technically going through an HDR certification process. That is all I have on it. I don't know what that process is. I don't know how far along they are in that process. And if they get certified, I don't know what they will be certified for because, again, I don't have that information. I just know they are currently in the HDR certification process. I think what yes means here is that it is technically HDR capable, but it's not HDR certified. And I'm going to be honest here, and this is where we get into the realm of subjectivity. I do not like the HDR capabilities of this monitor. When I turn on HDR in Windows, I barely see a difference, but the little bit of a difference I do see makes the image darker. And in my experience with HDR, it should be making the image brighter. And so I'm not really a big fan of that personally. But again, that's my opinion. You get into the realm of subjectivity. And also, I'm not an image expert. I'm not an image calibrator, a color calibrator. That's not what I do here on the channel. So I'm not running any type of fancy profiles with this monitor. From that standpoint, I think the price can be lower. I do think the HDR on the website should be a little bit more clear other than yes. And personally, I don't like the HDR capabilities of this monitor. Outside of that, the monitor is really great for what it is. I think the adaptive sync works incredibly well. Absolutely no screen tearing in my experience from what I was able to observe. And so I do like the monitor. You can always get into the realm of, well, it could be more. It's 1440p. Why not 4K? It's 180 hertz. Why not 240? It's IPS. Why not OLED? You can always get into the realm of that. But when you have to cut the specs off and say, okay, this is the product we're offering, I think it's a pretty good product for what it is. It is a matte display. I'm also not a fan of that, but I can't be mad at that because the majority of displays on the market are matte. They're not glossy. And see, I'm spoiled because my main monitor is an OLED TV. Obviously, that is a hard standard to live up to. When you leave an OLED glossy display and go to basically anything else, it's gonna be hard to be impressed with it. But objectively looking at the monitor, I think it's good for what it is. But those are a couple of things that I do think Pixio needs to fix. Now, with all that being said, let's take a look at some games at 1440p. And what I did here was I took my camera and I pointed it at the monitor to try and show you both the performance of the GPU as well as how well the monitor actually looks while gaming. And what I will say is that I did do my very best to try and honor this monitor and accurately represent it. But again, I am not an image expert, and I do think I probably need better camera equipment to really do these types of videos going forward, but I did do the best that I could. And without any further ado, here is what I have. Okay, first up is Ghost of Tsushima, and as you can see, it looks amazing. I mean, the game itself is absolutely phenomenal, but this monitor does an incredible job at really just showing you how beautiful this game is. The colors are beautiful, the graphics are great. There's There's no screen tearing. As you can see, the gameplay here is buttery smooth, and I am purposely not showing performance metrics at this time because I did want to give an image of how beautiful this monitor is while gaming. I definitely was not disappointed with it while gaming. And now let's go ahead and turn on the frame rate counter, and as you can clearly see, we are averaging about 125 FPS with 1% lows between 103 to 105 FPS, and our active frame rate is a little bit above 130 FPS for most of the time. And again, this is not bad performance at all, but it is surprising because you are talking about an RTX 4090 at 1440p, not 4K, 1440p. But at the end of the day, it's a single player story driven game if you're not counting the multiplayer mode that it has, and this is definitely more than enough performance. But all in all, the monitor handles it well, and if I wanted to turn down the settings or turn on something like frame generation or DLSS, I could get closer and exceed that 180 hertz threshold. So the monitor here does have room to spare in terms of frame rate, and the image quality is not bad at all. I think this looks phenomenal. Next up is another new game called XDefiant, and this is a first-person shooter, and as you can tell, the 4090 is eating this game alive. This is native 1440p with everything maxed out. Our average frame rate is around 222 FPS. Our 1% lows are in the mid 140s, and with a game like this and being able to push these high frame rates, this is where adaptive sync really comes in handy. And as you can see here, this monitor is 180 hertz, but we are way above that, and adaptive sync is kicking in, and you can see there's no screen tearing or anything like that. This is a phenomenal gaming experience. Next up is Hogwarts Legacy, and this is my typical Hogsmeade benchmark run, and the game is currently running at native 1440p on the ultra quality preset. And as you can see, the 4090 here surprisingly is actually not doing all that great. Our 1% lows are atrocious. We're below 50 FPS for our 1% lows, and our average frame rate is rising and falling, you know, the longer that I'm playing the game and running through Hogsmeade. I think we land somewhere between 110 to 112 FPS on average. And unfortunately, Hogwarts Legacy is just one of those games that was built in Unreal Engine and didn't get all the proper gaming optimizations it needed after launch. And so that's why the gaming performance is not as great as we would hope it would be, but the game is still playable and enjoyable even with this performance, and the game does look phenomenal on this monitor. Next up is Starfield, and I already apologize for my camera work here. It definitely could have been a little bit better, so my apologies about that, but at least you can see what the game looks like on the monitor. It definitely doesn't look bad. And as for the performance, well, this is native 1440p, everything maxed out, no upscaling of any kind, and our average frame rate in New Atlantis is only about 121 FPS, with our 1% lows around 79 to 80 FPS. Again, it's one of those situations you would think you could expect more performance with a 4090 and a 7800X3D, but you know, according to Todd Howard, this is perfectly fine, and you know, we should just find a way to upgrade the PC, right? Next up is a game you know has no performance issues, and that is Doom Eternal. Native 1440p with the Ultra Nightmare quality preset, no upscaling of any kind, and with the 7800X3D and the RTX 4090, you can see our average frame rate is almost 350 frames per second, and our 1% lows are just under 150 FPS. This is absolutely crazy. This is truly a phenomenal gaming experience. Our colors are looking good, and our gaming performance itself is very smooth. The adaptive sync technology on this monitor is working flawlessly. There are no stutters or hiccups or screen tearing or anything of that nature. This is truly a great way to really test out what a piece of hardware is capable of pushing. And as you can see here, the 7800X3D, the 4090 are really pushing this game to its limit, and the monitor's keeping up, and we're not having any issues at all. We're totally fine with no screen tearing. That is truly phenomenal. And for the last game that I'm testing, I'm taking a look at Ratchet and Clank. This game is truly fun to play. I got all the achievements in it, and I really just love going back and playing this game from time to time. But that's besides the point. This game does look phenomenal. I don't know if you've ever played it, but this is truly a beautiful looking game, and unfortunately it's not coming across on my camera as well as I would like for it to, but I assure you, if you think this looks good, it looks way better in person on this monitor. The IPS display really does this game justice, and it truly pops. And in terms of performance, you can see our average frame rate is about 130, 134 FPS. Our 1% lows are around 70 FPS, give or take. And this is native 1440p with everything maxed out, with no upscaling, and there's no ray tracing. So yes, if I did turn on ray tracing, the gaming performance would fall quite substantially, but this is one of those games that really kind of hits the CPU fairly hard. But overall, the game runs very well, and there's no screen tearing, and the game does look great, in my opinion, on this monitor. Okay, for my final thoughts, I will talk about the monitor, and I will talk about the 4090 at 1440p. First, the 4090 at 1440p. So, is the 4090 overkill for 1440p? Well, yes, it is technically, and we've already talked about that in the beginning of the video, but as you saw with some of the games out there, it's not always what you would expect, because what you would expect is that we have a $1,600 graphics card, the fastest gaming GPU on the market with 24 gigabytes of VRAM and a 4K monster. So at 1440p, it should really be able to just dominate all of these games, but that is not always the case. Now, there are games where we do see exactly what we would expect out of a 4090. Look at Doom Eternal, for example. You're talking well over 300 FPS, and in the case of XDefiant, you're talking well over 200 FPS, and so the 4090 does what you would expect it to do. I also had other games that also had similar results that did not make it into the video because, like I said before, I do think I need to upgrade my camera equipment for videos like this in the future, because the footage at first looked okay on my little LCD screen for my camera, and then I got it into the editing bay and it just did not meet my standards of quality, so I decided to cut it out. And so there are benchmarks that did get left on the cutting room floor, so please just be mindful of that. But there are other games out there like Hogwarts Legacy or Ratchet and Clank where you would expect to see a lot more performance at 1440p, but we don't. Now, both of those games do hit the CPU very hard, and that could be a factor, but I think what you could really learn from this is the fact that there is so much that goes into gaming performance and game development and game optimization outside of just how big is your GPU. There's so much more that goes into it. And so sometimes you see the proper support and you see the proper optimizations in place, and sometimes, unfortunately, you do not. But now let's quickly talk about the Pixio monitor. Here's what I got to say about it. Overall, I do think it is a really solid monitor, and I think it's a really good value. $229, you're getting a 1440p fast IPS monitor with a 180 hertz refresh rate and adaptive sync technology. And like I said before, there are other monitors with very similar specs that are slightly cheaper. And so what I would say to that is, Pixio, if you're listening, consider lowering the price, and as a consumer, wait for a sale or something like that. Maybe you can find a deal. As I mentioned before in the video, there are things about it, obviously, that could be better, but you can always say that, right? So for what's being offered and for the price, do I think it's bad? No, I don't. I definitely think it's a good monitor. The price could and should be a little bit lower because the competition demands it. But outside of that, everything else I think is pretty much up to snuff. So good job, Pixio. Thank you for working with me. Thank you for the opportunity. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. Let me know in the comment section below. Are you interested in this monitor? What do you think about the 4090? Did you buy one? And are you happy that you bought one? Are you going to get the 5090 later this year? Drop a comment. I look forward to talking to you. If you're new, get subscribed, hit the like button, do all the YouTube things. Consider checking out Patreon. And until next time, E-Rock out.